A lot of people like me were saying things around, this show, we were saying stuff around 2020, and I know you were on Sky News and other people all over the place were talking about this. But you are somebody who's been in that position, that Anastasia Palaszczuk, Mark McGowan and Dan Andrews and Gladys Berejiklian found themselves in. What would you have done?
Well, I can honestly say I would have looked to people like DeSantis in Florida as my inspiration. Yep. And the lady's name escapes me, but she was the governor of South Dakota, I think.
Kristi Noem.
Yeah, and also what the leadership in Sweden were doing. And I would have pushed relentlessly for a more sensible approach, a risk-based approach. And what we should have done is protected the elderly,
yep.
the immune system compromised, and we should have allowed kids to go to school, we should have allowed people to get on with their lives, and we shouldn't have smashed small business and the economy in the way that we did. And what we're seeing now, the inflation, the cost of living crisis, high interest rates crushing middle class Australia, all those things have come from the poor response to COVID. I mean, probably there's a bit off.
Did they have any other choice?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They absolutely did, unequivocally did. And again, not being wise after the event, I was on the public record from, say, September, October 2020, and continue to push these points of view.
I think it's the framework with which you're looking at the problem, right, as a leader. They were looking at it through the framework of, let's just not have any death. If there's any death, we're going to get... And I think Dan Andrews had just introduced into the Victorian legislation a code under which directors were liable for deaths that occurred in their workplace, criminally liable. And that probably scared the wits out of them with this, because they thought if we have any more deaths after they had the tragedy with the nursing home at the beginning, if we have any more deaths, we may get held responsible for that, and under our own laws this might lead to some horrible consequences personally. So I guess they were just looking at that one metric. They had everybody hypnotised on this one metric of how many COVID deaths, and it didn't matter what other damage was caused.
But just to remind people of one thing, like Palaszczuk at one stage had a situation where if you flew from Sydney or Melbourne into Brisbane, you could come in, okay? But if you were trying to drive in, so you're a person of limited means, you couldn't get in across the border. And there were sort of Queenslanders camped at Murwillumbah.
Oh, I'll never forget that. Yeah,
who could not come back to their homes, could not come back to their families, could not come back to look after their pets or their loved ones. I mean,
And the most ridiculous thing...
And this was just waved through by the mainstream media, waved through by Scott Morrison, waved through by the state LNP opposition. As you can tell, I'm really angry about this still. And they should never have got away with this.
And to bring it back on topic, that's what I was talking about, right? It's the perspective with which you're making these decisions. You're making these decisions from the perspective of, well, we just don't want anyone to die, so we'll do anything.
What about
Queensland?
What about Queensland hospitals are for Queenslanders?
Yeah.
What a perverse
statement.
What a
sick thing to say.
Yeah.